Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you for stopping by. Christmas beckons. Let me start with macro thoughts and Andreas Steno. A Phase 1 deal, a landslide Bojo victory, and a truckload of US dollar liquidity announced over year turn. No one dares to be short risk into the holidays in this environment. And he puts out a weekly research note, and the link is on Rich Wrap-Ups. Home thoughts, morning view in a piece of heaven, Laikipia, photo by Dimitri Siris via Kenya Pics. Isn't that beautiful? Lamu Island is a part of Kenya, but life there is really something different. Kenya Pics again. And then finally, the Tana River Delta. This photo is by Kid Helicopters. And normally, I think it was just, it floods, it's feast or famine around that delta. Political reflections, give it up to this Lebanese protester, a Premier League club should sign him. Karl R.E. Marx. And it really is a tiny little video, but well worth watching if you've got a second. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is seen here returning to 10 Downing Street and is welcomed by staff following an audience with Her Majesty the Queen. And it was a singular triumph. Sinn Féin, SNP and Johnson's pro-Brexit Conservative Party are all winners tonight. Nationalism isn't only taking the UK out of the EU, it's dissolving the UK itself. That's Michael D. Weiss, which is a very valid point. Charlie Robertson alerted me to a super tour de force level article by Dominic Cummings, The Hollow Men. Some reflections on Westminster and Whitehall, but actually his reflections, you could say, are about the world we live in today. He quotes one of my favourite poems, Mr. Kurtz, He Dead, a penny for the old guy. We are the hollow men, we are the stuffed men, leaning together, headpiece filled with straw, alas. Our dried voices, when we whisper together, are quiet and meaningless as wind in dry grass or rats' feet over broken glass in our dry cellar, shape without form, shade without colour, paralyzed force, gesture without motion. And then one of the most powerful pieces of poetry, between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow. You're a mutant virus, I'm the immune system, and it's my job to expel you from the organism. Department of Education official about Gove's team. Complexity makes prediction hard. Our world is based on extremely complex, non-linear, interdependent networks, physical, mental, social. Properties emerge from feedback between vast numbers of interactions. For example, the war of ant colonies, the immune system's defenses, market prices, and abstract thoughts all emerge from the interaction of millions of individual agents. Interdependence, feedback, and non-linearity mean that systems are fragile and vulnerable to non-linear shocks. Big things come from small beginnings and problems cascade. They come not single spies, but in battalions. Prediction is extremely hard, even for small timescales. Effective action and even loose control are very hard, and most endeavours fail. Blowfield, Kronstein, you are sure this plan is foolproof? Kronstein, yes, it is, because I have anticipated every possible variation of counter move. Political analysis is full of chess metaphors, he says, reflecting an old tradition of seeing games as models of physical and social reality. A game which has 10 different possible moves at each turn and runs for 2 turns has 102 possible ways of being played. If it runs for 50 turns, it has 1,050 possible ways of being played, a number which substantially exceeds the numbers of atoms in the whole of our planet Earth. If it runs for 80 turns, it has 1,080 possible ways of being played, which is about the estimated number of atoms in the universe. Chess is merely 32 pieces on an 8x8 grid with a few simple rules, but the number of possible games is much greater than 1080. Kronstein's confidence, often seen in politics, is therefore misplaced even in chess, yet chess is simple compared to the systems that scientists or politicians have to try to understand, predict and control. These themes of uncertainty, non-linearity, complexity and prediction have been ubiquitous motifs of art, philosophy and politics. We see them in Homer, where the gift of an apple causes the Trojan War, in Athenian tragedy, where a chance meeting at a crossroads settles the fate of Oedipus, in Othello's dropped handkerchief, and in War and Peace with Nikolai Rostov playing cards with Dolokhov, praying that one little card will turn out differently, save him from ruin and allow him to go happily home to Natasha. The people at the apex of political power, elected and unelected, are far from the best people in the world in terms of goals, intelligence, ethics, or competence. Their education and training is such that almost nobody has the skills needed to cope with the complexity they face, or even to understand the tools that might help them. While our ancestor chiefs understood bows, horses, and agriculture, our contemporary chiefs and those in the media responsible for scrutiny of decisions generally do not understand their equivalents and are often less experienced in managing complex organizations than their predecessors. Traditional politics collides with markets and technology, a combustible mixture of ignorance and power. Traditional politics over 6 million years of hominid evolution involved an attempt to secure in-group cohesion, prosperity and strength in order to dominate or destroy nearby outgroups in competition for scarce resources. Our civilization now depends on science and technology, underlying complex interdependent networks in the economy, food, medicine, transport, communications, and so on. The structure of these networks makes them fragile and therefore vulnerable to non-linear shocks. Technology can inflict huge physical destruction and help manipulate the feelings and ideas of many people, including sometimes particularly the best educated, through information operations. Further, technology makes it easier to do these things potentially without detection, which could render conventional deterrence obsolete. Robert Trivers, one of the most influential evolutionary thinkers of the last 50 years, has described how evolutionary dynamics can favor not just deception, but self-deception. Conflict for resources is ubiquitous. Deception helps win. A classic evolutionary arms race encourages both deception detection and even better deception, Perhaps humans evolved to deceive themselves because this fools others' detection systems. That is perhaps one reason why most people consistently rate themselves as above average. They think they're prepared to run the country, but many cannot run their own diaries. Politics therefore suffers from a surfeit of narcissists. Of course, he was referencing The Hollow Men, which I won't read in full because I read it many times before. But let me finish. Between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow. For thine is the kingdom. Between the conception and the creation, between the emotion and the response, falls the shadow. Life is very long. Between the desire and the spasm, between the potency and the existence, between the essence and the descent, falls the shadow. For thine is the kingdom, for thine is, life is, for thine is the. This is the way the world ends, this is the way the world ends, this is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. And then I watched Paul Mason's analysis on France 24's The World This Week, which is a must-watch every week, and he starts at 34 minutes and 51 seconds, and he's well worth listening to, about the Labour defeat. For the best part of 3 years, Britain has been stalled at a political T-junction. Last night, the electorate put their foot down and yanked the steering wheel to the right, he says. Conservatives gained an avalanche of seats in small, socially conservative towns that were once Labour's heartlands. Labour held only the cities and the big towns. The same crisis that's ripped through centre-left parties across the world, driven by a mismatch between their values and those of elderly, white, working-class people, has hit Britain. First, Brexit will happen. It will happen fast, and its impetus will be towards radical deregulation of our society. Second, a new Scottish independence crisis will open up. You cannot rule a nation of 6 million people who want Europe, social justice and national independence with a viceroy from London. You may be wondering how this slam dunk by the right against the left happened. To me, it's simple. We're facing an alliance of mainstream right and the far right, what the philosopher Hannah Arendt called the alliance of the elite and the mob. Every lesson from the 1930s tells us the only answer to this is an alliance of the centre and the left. But survey the results and it's clear the centre and the left did not want to ally. They wanted to rip each other to shreds. For Labour, the main task was to stop this election becoming a referendum on Brexit, and they did, but only among their loyal supporters. On the doorsteps, young working families eagerly took our leaflets and posters, even in the towns we lost. For the right-wing half of the population, actually numbering around 45% of the national total, it was always and only about Brexit, migration and English nationalism. I expected Labour to lose, but not this badly. Given Corbyn's unpopularity and the newness of Johnson, it was always going to be an uphill struggle. The shocking thing is that almost without a machine or any campaigners, the Tories took historic Labour towns because the vibe was on their side. The vibe was best summed up by a man who approached me in the high street of Lee, where I grew up. "I'm not allowed to say what I want," he began. We coaxed it out of him. "I want Boris Johnson to send people round to the homes of every Romanian and throw them and their kids in the back of a van, lock the door, and drive them to Dover," he said. So, Paul Mason again, the bigger picture is this: like it or not, there is a culture war in Britain. Corbyn already symbolised the cultural enemy for the express reading nativist workers in places where we've lost. After May, for many progressive workers in Labour's big city heartlands, he looked disinterested in championing their values. His strategy was to refuse culture war, but it engulfed him. I think that's right to a great deal. The central demographic fact of Western democracy is that there aren't enough young people, and that we are the first societies in human history where the old outnumber the young, David Runciman in the New Yorker. And that's right, that meant that the youth quake was actually not large enough. Sterling, let's take a look at what that's doing. Sterling is last 134.07. This chart is from FX Pip Titan, who in a previous tweet was quoting JP Morgan, which said they reckon we've seen the high for this year and next. What's striking in the new French discourse on Russia, as if nobody ever spoke with Putin, tried a reset, tried to move Russia closer to Europe, there is a record of 2 decades of failed attempts to do exactly that. Maybe there are some lessons to be learned. And this is speaking to Macron's pivot to Russia. And I just go back to Salif Keita, said Emmanuel Macron is just a kid, and I'm sure Putin is smacking his lips in anticipation of having Macron for dinner. Jean-Yves Le Drian, the Minister of Europe and Foreign Affairs, on a toujours dit que la Russie était une menace, et nous l'avons subie, mais elle est aussi incontournable. The lesson is one that Paris does not seem to understand post-Entente romanticism. Russia does not want to work with the EU unless the EU, France included, acts according to Russian interests, as Ralcom. Minor concessions by the Kremlin are a tester, not steps forward. And I wrote about this on the 2nd of December when I was saying if President Macron is diagnosing Europe's preeminent threat as militant Islam, then Fortress Europe is already lost to the geopolitical grandmaster Vladimir Putin. This was after the loss of 13 soldiers during an anti-terrorism operation in the dead of night in Mali when 2 helicopters collided. Salif Keita has told President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita to stop subjecting yourself to little Emmanuel Macron. He's just a kid. Macron then held a press conference in which he pronounced that he is not interested in Trump or in Europe's strategic autonomy. He thinks that NATO has misidentified its enemy. He wants a NATO that works with Russia and China and fights against political militant Islam. And then, of course, he had that argument with Erdogan. So France aligning with Russia to balance against Germany and Britain is a long-running theme in modern European history, says Hoyer Wolf. So very fluid situation, and we've got to keep an eye on how things pan out. In the past few days, I've highlighted how China's Belt and Road Initiative has been a Trojan horse since 2013 for securing critical geopolitical footprints and resources throughout Eurasia, Africa, and South America. This is man_integrated. I'm just taking little bits from what is a very, very interesting Twitter stream, well worth your time. This is a tweet from November when he's talking about the Blue Dot scheme that the US is responding with. He says every geopolitical action taken is an act of narrative warfare. This is especially true when the nations in question signal an intent to shift billions of dollars in trade flow through energy and logistics infrastructure investments. The media lies, the assets can't. And then he's saying this is the peculiar genius of a man like President Trump. For all of his flaws, he understands the power of narrative as only a showman can. And he understands that the moment a person decides to turn narrative into action, it is logistics that enables it, which I think is interesting as well. Let's go to the currency markets. Euro dollar 111.49, dollar index 96.992, Japanese yen 109.39, Swiss franc 0.98325, the pound 134.07, the Australian dollar 0.6874, India rupee 70.943, South Korean won 1172.635, the Rial 410.91, Egyptian pound 16.0895, and the rand just above key resistance of 1450 at 1451. But I think what is, to me, the defining move in the markets is the fire hose of liquidity that the US is injecting into the system. Dollar index 96.971. As I said from a few weeks ago, I think it's rolling over. Euro dollar, this chart is from FX Pip Titan, 111.50 last. Commodity markets, my article over the weekend was about Saudi Aramco. Aramco raised $25.6 billion in the biggest ever IPO, selling shares at 32 rials each and valuing the company at $1.7 trillion, overtaking Microsoft and Apple as the most valuable listed company in the world. At the latest valuation of 1.96 trillion, but I think we might have topped 2 on Sunday, Aramco is a whisker shy of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's target of $2 trillion set some 4 years ago. At $2 trillion, it is worth more than technology giants Apple, which is second and worth 1.19 trillion, Microsoft, and bigger even than the top 5 oil companies ExxonMobil, Total, Royal Dutch Shell, Chevron, and BP combined. The Saudi stock exchange Tadawul has elevated to the 7th largest exchange in the world after the successful listing and the post-IPO pop in the price. It is a great day for Saudi Arabia and the leadership of Saudi Arabia and for the people of Saudi Arabia. It is a D-Day for Aramco. It's a day of reckoning and vindication. That's the Energy Minister, Prince Abdul Aziz bin Salman, telling Reuters in Madrid. Prince Abdul Aziz predicted investors who didn't buy into the offering would be chewing their thumbs after missing out. I know he is proud, his half-brother and oil minister, Prince Abdul Aziz bin Salman, said in a TV interview after the shares were successfully allocated last week. He made us all proud because he took good decisions. These decisions, you have seen it now, have brought us a 4.6 times oversubscription. Amina Bakr tweeted, the general mood in Saudi Arabia with regards to the Aramco IPO from people I spoke to can be summarized in 3 words: vindicated, triumphant, relieved. Notwithstanding some churlish international commentary, at every turn the Crown Prince and his advisors have sought to determine the price of the offering rather than leave it to the market. Wealthy Saudi families have been pressured to buy shares. Banks have had to issue loans to retail investors. Funds in the kingdom and regional allies, including Abu Dhabi, were asked to bolster the sale after plans to market the listing globally were abandoned. The size of the original stake had to be scaled back to 1.5%, said the Financial Times. The comments by the Financial Times counterintuitively speak to the sharp and smart moves by the Saudi authorities. This is, in my opinion, a singular triumph for the kingdom, the Crown Prince and his team. It was precisely correct to limit the supply of shares, 1.5%, in order to maintain a structure where demand outstripped supply. This is lesson 101 in the business of IPOs. It was precisely correct to sell shares into strong hands. Your own nationals and sovereign wealth funds from the neighborhood represent strong hands. affording leverage versus a security with a proposed dollar dividend of 3.75% is a risk-adjusted no-brainer for the banks. It would have been plain irresponsible to have done anything differently. Why on earth would you sell more shares than the market could absorb into international markets where short sellers would have a boondoggle? That would have been a little insane. The Saudi authorities have captured the bulk of the value addition from the listing. Limiting transaction fees to below $70 million was also clever business, and I'm sure has been a catalyst for some of the churlish commentary by those who were salivating at the prospect of hundreds of millions of dollars of fees. This was optimal stewardship of the public purse, plain and simple. Furthermore, selling shares in your home market and catapulting the Tadawul to the 7th largest exchange in the world is also optimal. No country in the world is truly sovereign unless it has ownership of its own capital markets. The kingdom has parlayed itself into the bulge bracket via the Aramco listing. That is a significant achievement and a crystallizing of a one-off opportunity. Danilo Honorino was quoted as follows, "This is the Ferrari of the oil companies," he said. And if you want to buy this Ferrari, you need to go to Riyadh, and that's the final overarching point in my view. This is a share price chart from Tassi Sec. Aramco, this is another chart which was from Saturday by Mozi Hezbon. That was after 2 days of trading, and he was bullish quite correctly. Shares closed up on Sunday 1.63% at 37.4 rials. Is just one stock, Aramco, and Saudi Arabia is now the world's 7th biggest stock market. This is from the terminal Srini Sivabala. Let's have a look at the price of crude oil. That's at $59.86, just shy of $60, which is a key level. Emerging markets, watch Rahul Gandhi at Bharat Bachao rally. My name is not Rahul Savarkar. My name is Rahul Gandhi. I will never apologize for the truth. I was told in Parliament by BJP yesterday, Rahul ji, you gave a speech. Apologize for that. I was told to apologize for speaking something correct. My name is not Rahul Savarkar. My name is Rahul Gandhi. I will never apologize for the truth. I wrote about the politics of ethnocratic nationalism on the 2nd of December, and I was saying essentially the soft underbelly of that type of political raison d'etre is the economy. India's outlook has worsened. Economic growth slowed to a 6-year low in Q2 of full year 2019. Fixed investment grew at the weakest pace in nearly 5 years. Private sector PMI averaged lower in the October to November period than in Q2. That's from Mr. Diakal. As I said, Narendra Modi, whose calling card was economic growth in Gujarat, notwithstanding his fondness for a good old-fashioned pogrom. I was talking about Kashmir, where he's embarked on a West Bank level settlement project. I was quoting Sandeep Chakravorty, India's Consul General to the city of New York, who's told Kashmiri Hindus and Indian nationals that India will build settlements modelled after Israel for the return of the Hindu population to Kashmir. I said 3 years ago India was enjoying economic growth of about 9%. Now the rate of expansion has slumped to just half of that. GDP figures the weakest recorded under Prime Minister Modi, who first swept to power 5 years ago, promising to take India's economy to new heights and create millions of jobs every year, he said. This is a photograph which has gone viral, but I saw it via Rana Ayoub's Twitter stream, Democracy. Sub-Saharan Africa, Emmanuel Macron signals rethink on French-backed Africa currency. This is the Financial Times. Macron is this week expected to signal a possible rethink on the French-backed CFA franc used by West and Central African states, but that critics see as a colonial relic. Since 1999, it has been pegged to the euro, giving member states monetary stability while supporting trade with Europe. The optics are so bad, I don't think it is sustainable for France to continue this arrangement. The political costs may be outweighing the economic gains, said Carlos Lopez, who said the currency's stability had benefited French exporters and investors. He means what he says when he says he's ready for changes, even radical changes. Being in the monetary union has also helped keep a lid on fiscal discipline, said Amaka Anku at Eurasia Group. You don't see the crazy fiscal slippages in any of the CFA countries you see in, say, Ghana. That is the point. French officials said the decision lay with African nations that use the system and that Paris was open to any changes proposed, for example, to the deposit requirements. Asked whether France would be ready to scrap it altogether, one senior official said, "It's more a question of evolution." The CFA franc, particularly the obligation for member states to keep half their reserves at France's central bank, has long provoked resentment. Psychologically, with regards to the vision of sovereignty and managing your own money, it's not good that this model continues. His position is that if the Western African heads of state do not want the CFA franc anymore, they should be able to exit that currency, providing they have the means of doing so. She had concerns about a monetary revolution that she likened to the Arab Spring, referring to the uprisings in the Middle East and North Africa that started in 2011. People are arguing from a very romantic and passionate point. We should take a very cool approach. A volatile currency is by no means a driver of growth. Counterintuitively, I think the CFA has been a uniquely good instrument. It has created a positive feedback loop of a stable currency, lower interest rates, and avoided the debacles we've witnessed from Ghana, 25 years of declines in the currency, to practically anywhere else you care to name in Africa. Bad idea. Zambia says ambassadors should leave after defending gay couples. Zambia's President Edgar Lungu said he wanted the US ambassador to leave the country after the diplomat criticized the African nation for sentencing a gay couple to 15 years of imprisonment for having a consensual relationship. We want him gone. US Ambassador Daniel Foote said last month he was personally horrified after the High Court sentenced the two men and called on the government to reconsider laws that punish minority groups. They have $500 million per annum of assistance via PEPFAR. I mean, this is madness. As I said, on the 14th of October, the canary in the coal mine is Zambia. On the frontier, the Lubumbashi Biennial makes art from obstacles. This hot, dry metropolis may seem an unlikely art center. It is 1,000 miles from the capital, Kinshasa, on the southern edge of an enormous, unwieldy country, typically associated with wars and other crises. Yet the Lubumbashi Biennial, founded in 2008, recently held its 6th edition in this city, in Katanga province. 42 artists, and really some excellent work. Look at this, Leonard Pongo's ongoing series, Primordial Earth. Mr. Pongo travelled to remote parts of the country to make his photographs. A wall painting by Ghislain Tshisekedi, Ishango Kwetu, suggests both a modern circuit board and markings on a Paleolithic bone tool found in Congo. That was great as well. And this detail of an artwork by Mega Mingiedu, Table Ronde Impartial. This teenager, dusted with sand from his work in a gold mine, embodies the sadness and heroism of the people of Niger, photographed by the great Pascal Maitre. That's by Celestine Mongo, who was opining on the death of 71 soldiers who were killed in Niger by a terrorist group. And essentially, if France withdraws, these groups are going to overrun the Sahel. Zimbabwe's economy is hobbled by a clash of egos. At the heart of Zimbabwe's economic paralysis is a personality clash. Policies that are quickly reversed, confusing contradictions in public statements, an economy that's forecast by the government to contract 6.5% this year, and an annual inflation rate that reached 440% in October. Monetary policy is an absolute shambles. It is. Cepheus Capital research note on Ethiopia's IMF program, very insightful. Indeed, this is a massive vote of confidence. Have a look at what this is. There are 4 pages, and it's very insightful what they're saying as well. Look, he won the Nobel Prize, of course, in 2019. Some people think, it was way too early. But as I said, it's the excitement he's engendered. He's, a different kind of African politician, post-independence, sort of little bit Macronian. And as I said, in July 2018, these 90 or so days represent the most consequential arrival of an African politician on the African stage since Mandela walked out of prison, blinking in the sunlight, and constructed his rainbow nation. I said he faces a fiendishly complicated task, fending off the centripetal forces which are tearing Ethiopia apart. But he has a singular self-belief. He moves with speed. He's Gladwellian. He's a little bit like what Dominic Cummings was saying you needed to be. Whoever controls the territory possesses it. Possession of territory is not primarily about laws and contracts, but first and foremost of movement and circulation. And then my article on the 2nd of July 2018 was talking about dramology, his sense of speed. I was comparing him to the Asema, the dance, which is very fluid and fast, and to Kylian Mbappe, who came on the football scene, and saying that he moved with lightning speed. South African all shares up 7.61% year-to-date. Dollar versus Rand. Rand is sitting on key resistance just above 14.50. Egyptian pound 160818. EGX 30 up 3.05% so far this year. More than 50% of all Nigerian migrants in the EU come from a single, relatively small city. I visited Benin City to find out why. This is the correspondent. It's fascinating. On the surface, there's nothing special about Benin City, Nigeria, but something extraordinary is going on in Nigeria's 4th biggest city. You won't find a single person here without a family member in Europe. The majority of Nigerian migrants in Europe come from this city of fewer than 1.5 million people. It's as though every Mexican immigrant in the US was, say, from Tijuana. Once someone tells you about the proceeds, you notice them everywhere. It's as if someone has handed you 3D glasses at the IMAX and the film has snapped into focus. You see what had been invisible. That petrol station is being built with money from Europe. That red Land Rover was paid for in euros. New hotels are being erected with European money. Those little boutiques with fabulous names, glitz and glam, exclusive choice collections, G. Armani fashion, have been set up thanks to European sponsors. Enter a church and you hear the priest praying, "Your children shall cross in Jesus' name. They shall cross well, they shall not die." If you conduct a poll on the street here, predicts Omo, 8 out of 10 families will have children in Europe. His own uncle, aunt and 3 cousins have crossed. Everyone in Benin City has family or friends in Europe, and given the chance, just about everyone would want to go themselves. "I would go right away, even without saying goodbye to my mother," says Sandra, who volunteers at her church. "Wouldn't think twice," says Sunny, 25, who's studying at university. Just last year, his cousin drowned in the Mediterranean. Among EU policymakers and migration experts, alarm bells have been ringing for a while about Benin City. The statistics don't lie. Around 60% of Nigerian asylum seekers who arrive in Europe are from Edo State, the capital of which is Benin City. Overwhelming majority come from the city itself. To understand the present, we have to return to the 1980s. At that time, Italian businesses were establishing themselves in Edo State. Some Italian businessmen or married women from Benin City who moved back to Italy with their spouses. They built 4 flats, houses made up of 4 apartments, to earn rental income. The women were called tallos or Italian mamas. Everyone looked up to them. Young women saw them as the role models and wanted to go to Europe too. Researchers call this cumulative causation theory. The tallos began to lend money to girls and their families so they could also travel to Italy. Not until these women arrived were they told how they would repay the loan. Some accepted, others were forced. All of them earned money. And so-called madams, they began to recruit other women in their home city. Then slowly the penny began to drop in Benin City. Huge numbers of their women were working in the Italian sex industry. Dollars are no taboo, a Benin City saying goes, another way of saying we couldn't care less where your money comes from. A woman in a blue and yellow wrapper is sitting against the wall with her head in her hands. Her daughter in Italy hasn't given her a code yet. Don't worry, the money will come, another woman says to comfort her before walking out with 2 large plastic bags. In Benin, this approach is called the 3 T's, trick, trap, transport. Originally it went like this. Trick, tell the woman she's going to Italy to work in an African supermarket or as a babysitter. Transport, send the woman off to Europe with a fake visa, plane tickets, which is more expensive, leaving the girl with a bigger debt, or via the Sahara and the Mediterranean Sea. If everyone knows that the T for trick is actually redundant, then why do women still go? The women are pressured into prostitution by their mothers. The shelter is badly needed. Families will often not take in women because their trip has been a failure, because they've not earned any money. Everyone here is competing to send their children to Europe, to build a house, to buy a car. A shower, no day kill. They say prostitution won't kill you. Family pressure, often from mothers, is the major reason that women continue to go, according to Sister Bibiana. Everyone here is sending their children to Europe to build a house, to buy a car. And then describing a house, he says, Edwin, that's the funny thing, his wavering voice betraying the tragic comedy. That friend never went to school and he builds a house, and I have my masters and I lay the tiles. That's the funny thing. Connection man is called a BOGO, specializes in filling out visa applications. What a story. This is a photograph of Philomena Isho Jumbo in front of her house in Benin City. Her daughter lives in Europe and sends back money regularly. This is another photo from that article. Have a look at it, it's really tremendous. And this is the residence of a diseased female smuggler who was known as Mama Italo. She paid for the house with the income from smuggling. Nigerian all shares down 15.57% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange is down 10.65% year to date. According to estimates, Africa's dry hair market, that is the market for weaves, wigs and hair extensions, is currently worth over $6 billion a year and growing rapidly. In Kenya, deforestation, overgrazing and climate change are destroying roots across the Mara. This is Nick Clark for Al Jazeera. Kenya T-bill rates 91 days at 7.2%, 182 day at 8.1%, 364 day at 9.8%. 2018 Eurobond issue rates came lower, the 10 years at 6.1%, the 30 year at 7.8%, 2019 7-year Eurobond 5.9%, 12 year at 7.1%. NSE has issued a profits warning saying performance was adversely affected by a challenging economic environment and reduced capital inflows from global investors. The company took proactive action, cost rationalization, diversification, launch of the derivatives market. The share price is down about 27% year to date and trades on a PE ratio of 13.37. According to a report, the insurance industry gross written premium grew by 6.5% to 174.9 billion shillings as at the end of quarter 3 2019. The NSE trades, that's not the listed company, but the actual stock exchange, trades at an average PE ratio of 12.3 and a dividend yield of 5.8%. The Nairobi All Shares up 14.31% year to date, and the NSE 20 is down 8.68% year to date. Thank you for stopping by.